has its fill of seeing. Young or old, those who depart this life never see enough of the world, never complete their task, never cherish their loved ones enough before they are called home. How they yearn for yet another respite from the final summons, and how we yearn to have them close to us for yet another challenge in our lives, yet another joy, yet another precious moment together. God, be now with those whose hearts are broken, because whenever parting comes, it comes too soon. Console them at this moment. Be near to them when light seems distant. Sustain them, O God, until the time of healing. For you who heal the brokenhearted and bind up their wounds, grant comfort and consolation to these mourners as they face their grief. Fill their lives with acts of love and kindness and truth, which serve as the genuine memorial to our dear Jordan Brown. The deep bond of love will always remain unbroken, even in moments like these. So this afternoon, we gather here to remember Jordan and join our hearts together to give comfort and strength to his family. We began our service with a psalm beautifully sung by Cantor Ott, and we now continue with another text from our tradition, thus linking Jordan's life with the millennial tradition of the people of Israel and the eternity of God. From the book of Kohelet, L'chol zman ve'et l'chol chafetz tachat hashemayim. There's a time for everything, a time for every experience under heaven, a time for being born and a time for dying, a time for planting and a time for uprooting the planted, a time for destroying and a time for healing, a time for tearing down and a time for building up, a time for weeping and a time for laughing, a time for wailing and a time for dancing, a time for throwing stones and a time for gathering stones, a time for embracing and a time for refraining from embraces, a time for seeking and a time for losing, a time for keeping and a time for discarding, a time for tearing and a time for sowing, a time for silence and a time for speaking, a time for loving and a time for hating, a time for war and a time for peace. And this is a time for sharing stories. So I want to invite up members of Jordan's family for some reflections and some words about Jordan.
Thank you all for being here. I'll just tell a couple stories. When I was around 13, around the time of my bar mitzvah, Baba told me, I'm going to tell you something you will never forget. Up until this point, our conversations had been pretty unserious. How's school? What sports are you playing? Normal, grandpa, and kid stuff. So you can imagine how excited I am. What he opens with, I'll tell you something you'll never forget. He says, Sam, the toilet paper always rolls forward. And I think he could tell I was confused. So he pressed on. He said, it's not backward. It's harder to pull down that way. There's no metaphor there. It's just a statement that he thought was true about toilet paper. Which leads me to my next statement. Baba was a man of principles. So I want to share some principles that he instilled in me and that I'll carry forward other than that toilet paper always rolls forward. Number one, life is too short. I frequently heard Baba tell me that life is too short, and I think we can all agree, especially today. I would ask Baba stories about, from college and when he moved to New York City from Chicago. He'd always tell me the same thing. I moved to New York so I could date models. He told me it was either that or law school. And I think he agreed that life was too short. So without a plan, he moved to New York City, where he eventually met my grandma in Washington Square Park. Just as a side, I currently live 2 blocks away from Washington Square Park. I go very regularly. It's a very special place for me and always reminds me I'm not too far from them. Number 2, anything important is worth investing in. When I was much younger, we were right in this room for a high holiday service. I was about 5 years old. Services were not my favorite activity. So you can imagine my surprise when I found out that we pay for them. No offense. So I asked him, I said, why are we paying for services? And he would say, because it's important. That answer rang true for a lot of things. Education, family, and particularly animals, because he believed it was important. Finally, at my varsity soccer banquet, my senior year of high school, my coach was giving his long-winded remarks to a room of a couple hundred people filled with, teammates and family and friends. In walks Baba halfway through his speech, walks right up to my table, which is right in the middle of the room, and he goes, "Sammy, my boy," completely interrupting my coach's speech, drawing all the attention from the rest of the room. I was trying to, calm him down, but he was pretty unbothered and just continued the conversation. So although at times obtuse, he was a man who stuck to his principles. He would teach me about opera, fine literature, classic movies, markets, football, friends, and tell stories about his family. I'll miss him dearly. Thank you.
Thank you all for being here. I know my father would be moved. My father had a look. Right before he said something, you learned to pay attention when you saw it, because whatever came next was either going to stop you in your tracks, catch you completely off guard, or make you laugh. That was Jordan Brown. And if you knew him, you're probably smiling right now because you know exactly the look I am talking about. Right after my son was born, my parents walked into the hospital room to meet their first grandchild. My dad looked at him carefully for a moment and said, "He's a funny-looking thing." And honestly, that was love from my father. He was born in Chicago in 1938. At around 18 months old, his life changed completely when he was placed into foster care. He was taken in by Pearl and Sam Stein, who became the parents who raised him, loved him, and gave him a home. My brother Mitch and I were adopted, and I don't think that was a coincidence. My dad understood from the inside what it meant for a child to need a family. He met my mother Roberta in Washington Square Park while she was on a date with someone else. I'm still not entirely sure how that worked, but 52 years of marriage suggest she made the right choice. And if you knew my mother, that tracks. My dad was an entrepreneur, a successful man who built something on his own terms. But if you asked him what he was most proud of, I don't think work would have come up. Not first, not second, probably not at all. He was opinionated, he was stubborn, and if you're in this room, you already know that, but that stubbornness was never really about being difficult. It was the same quality that made him show up for people decade after decade without wavering. He was proud to be from Chicago, deeply proud. And every year, when we were kids, we drove there from New Jersey. 17 hours over 2 days in a car. Real quality family time. But those trips mattered to him. We saw his family, we heard stories, and we did his unofficial food tour of Chicago. Portillo's for Italian beef and Chicago hot dogs on steam buns, Marie's for pizza, and Carson's for ribs. And God help you if you suggested another city had better hot dogs. My dad was proud to be Jewish. When I was in high school, he served as president of this very temple. And it wasn't just a title to him. It was a community, it was a responsibility, and it was another way of building something meaningful and give back. My father loved information, statistics, odds, spreads, rankings. He treated Jeopardy like an Olympic event. If you watched it with him, you quickly learned two things. First, he knew an alarming amount of random information. And second, he was absolutely keeping score against you, even if you didn't know that you were competing. But he also loved things that had nothing to do with numbers. He loved Italian opera, he loved going to Broadway shows, and over the years, he took opera classes just because he genuinely wanted to understand it more deeply. That was him, curious, engaged, and always learning. My dad wasn't a man who expressed his feelings easily, or he showed love in his own language. Every single day he sent out a group text with whatever professional sports games were being played that day and the spreads, every day. This was his way of reaching out, his way of saying, I'm here, I'm thinking of you. And when my brother married Brianne, he was thrilled to welcome her into our family, not cautiously, not gradually, fully. You saw that same loyalty in his friendships, In high school, he became part of a group called the Aristocrats, and those friendships never faded. Decades later, they were still brothers. Their wives became close friends too. For years, they spent every New Year's Eve together at the Polo Club in Florida, year after year. That tradition said everything about what loyalty meant to him. And then he became Baba. The day his first grandson, Sam, was born, something shifted in him. People who knew him saw it immediately. He became a grandfather and took that role more seriously than almost anything else in his life. And when my stepchildren, Aiden and Emma, came into our family, he didn't hesitate for a single second. He embraced them fully because my father understood better than most that family is not about biology. It never had been. Nothing gave him more pride than his grandchildren. And then there were dogs. Some people are dog owners. My father was something much deeper than that. There was Susie, our Cocker Spaniel, Farfel, our lovable mutt. Over the years, he opened his home to dogs that needed a place to land, especially Calla and Crook. And somehow even the next generation became his too. He became a devoted great-grandfather to Leroy, my brother's dog, and Daisy and Floyd, my dogs. He loved them, worried about them, talked about them constantly. Honestly, there were moments where we suspected dogs ranked higher than most human beings in my father's hierarchy of affection. And to be fair, dogs offer a kind of unconditional love that's hard to match. My father gave me two things I've carried my entire life. The first is it's never wrong to do the right thing. And second, trust but verify. And that wasn't about doubting you, it was about protecting you and making sure you knew how to protect yourself. Those two lessons tell you almost everything about who he was. A man with unshakable moral compass, a man who believed in people, but made sure they were prepared, and a man who taught through principles and presence more than words. My father was a complicated man. He was not perfect. He was not always easy, but he was a good man. A man who knew what it meant to need stability, and he spent his life creating it for the people around him, for his wife, for his children, for his grandchildren, and for his friends who became brothers, and even for dogs that needed a place to land. My father took up space in a room, not loudly, not by demanding attention, but you knew when Jordan Brown was there, and you absolutely know when he isn't. He lived a full 87 years, and almost every one of them spent building something, a business, a family, lifelong friendships, a community, and a life built on loyalty. He didn't always say, I love you with words, but he He said it by showing up every single day in every way he knew how. And if you were lucky enough to be loved by Jordan, you felt it. We felt it, Dad.
For those of you who don't know me, my name is Philip Zucker. I'm Sandra's husband and son-in-law to Jordan. Jordan had very strong beliefs, convictions, and faith. For those who don't know me, I don't really like to lose at anything that I do. I know that's a bit of a shocker to some of you that know me. Jordan was very well read and loved to watch the market. And when he talked about such topics, often he'd ask my opinion. But in the end, what he would say was, as only Jordan could, "I'm sorry, you're wrong." But after years had passed, I realized he didn't really mean anything by that. What it was him being comfortable enough around me to be himself. He loved his family, but often shared some of that tough love with his children, Sandra, his daughter, and Mitch, his son, whom he adored. Where he was soft and mushy and lovey was with his grandchildren, Emma and Aiden, and of course, Sam. When they got into college, he wore their sweatshirts proudly all around town. When they got their first jobs, he would brag to all of his friends. JB, Baba, Bob, may you rest in peace. You were a great person.
It is my honor now to call up our Rabbi Emeritus Bennett Miller, who was the rabbi here when Jordan served as this synagogue's president.
I think it's fair to say that none of us expected to be here today to comfort Jordan's family, to reflect on his life and his death. We were all getting ready for Mother's Day. I don't think it is fully sunk in that Jordan Brown has died. And yet here we are, a community of friends and family, each of us possessing memories of life lived with Jordan, and more importantly, each of us were here to comfort and sustain you, his family. You and I have come to the temple today to embrace Sandra and Phil, Mitchell and Brianne, Sam, Aiden and Emma vicariously since she is in Italy, together with Heidi and Jeff and all of Roberta and Jordan and Phil's family. We all hope that we are bringing to each of you a measure of comfort to to soften the sting of Jordan's passing and provide some balm to help heal the wounds sustained by his death. Permit me to frame my words this day around a poem that I have often read to myself. During my own life's journey, it has often given me comfort and even strength. I hope it will do so for all of you. It is entitled "To Come Back Home." Its author, probably unknown to all of us, Mae Williams Ward. This is what she wrote. To live is to go on a journey. To die is to come back home. My shoe soles are thin with wandering, sticky with clay and loam. There are marks of stones and of brambles. The leather is scuffed and torn, and I must not have walked quite straight, I think, for the heels are unevenly worn. I shall take off my shoes and sleep and rest. To live is to go on a journey. To die is to come back home. That image of life as a journey is deeply Jewish. The Torah begins our people's story with a call to travel, Lech Lecha, go forth. And the psalmist speaks of the language of walking when he declares, "Yea, though I walk through the valley of shadows, I will fear no harm, for you are with me." It is true. For Jordan, life was a journey, and his death was to come back home. This sanctuary, this temple, you heard it, Sandra described it for us. This Anshe Emeth for Jordan, this was home. This was the place where he and Roberta made a life for themselves, for their children, for their family. It was a place that he loved, for here he found meaning and purpose. Here he felt safe and secure, and here he found a community that embraced him, embraced Roberta, and embraced Sandra and Mitch too. Yes, Jordan's life's journey began first in Chicago, in that city on the lake where the people speak like Jordan with flat A's. I know, I still have some of it myself. And where they root for the Cubs or the White Sox, but never both. The Bears and the Bulls too. In Chicago, Jordan would begin his journey, his wandering through life, experiencing the brambles, the clay, and the loam. In Chicago, Jordan would learn the meaning of true friendship. For those who became his friends would be lifelong friends, a bond that held him and them together that would enable each of them to walk the path of life knowing that their friendship helped to sustain them in all times during their lives. Jordan's life journey would bring him to New York, to a career he thought and hoped would be in journalism that quickly, I'm still not sure, moved its way to Bloomingdale's, of all places. Still hard for me to imagine Jordan working at Bloomingdale's, but ultimately that would lead to his real calling, self-employment. I think it's fair to say that Jordan was not meant to work for someone else. There would only be two bosses to whom he would and could report: himself and Roberta. And speaking of Roberta, it was an auspicious day in Washington Square Park where he would meet her and begin a lifetime of blessing. She would walk with him on his journey. Until he met her, his life was lived in only two colors, black and white. But Roberta showed him that life could be lived in many colors. And while she saw that he was a man devoted to work, Roberta showed him that life was more than work, that life was about being devoted to family and community, to children, and especially to grandchildren. And together, Roberta and Jordan would come here to New Jersey, to Somerset, and then Morganville. And most of all, their journey to New Jersey would bring them here, to this place, this community, this temple that would become home. Both he and Roberta and both of you loved it. She found her place and connected with so many, especially the women, young, old, tall, small. Each time she would walk into the building, her eyes would light up, seeing and greeting friends, so many friends. And for Jordan, how many hours did he devote to the temple? How many Friday nights did he sit here on the bema next to me, arguing, but always in good cheer? Tuesday nights and meetings, hours and hours on the phone, carrying out the business of the temple. Truth be told, they both loved it. Who else would be so disciplined to make the drive up and down Route 18 between New Brunswick and Morganville, not once a week, but sometimes every day of the week? Throughout his journey, Jordan lived by a simple code: be disciplined in work and family life, even in play. Proofread everything you write and everything you do. Always strive to do the right thing and keep your word. It was uncomplicated, but it was his. And he lived it daily and religiously. Sometimes it made him blunt. More often it meant that he had an opinion, and as we heard, he shared it. Most of all, if he said he would do something, he did it. Jordan believed that you parent with conviction, not always with soft love. He believed in giving his all to provide for his family. He had high expectations of his kids, but some expectations, the same expectations he even had for himself. In his approach to life, he was matter of fact. As you, Sandra, told me, he didn't play in the gray. But when Sam arrived, Baba came out in him. I loved it, Sam. When you talked about Baba and everybody laughed, and Jordan probably would laugh the loudest and the hardest. It was the deepest part of his heart. I can't tell you over the years the number of times that he would send me an email or pick up the phone. Sam did this, Sam did that. Did you see this about Sam? He's been at Camp Harlem again. He's in a band. Went to Wisconsin. He's working in New York. That was it. And always with a weird sense of humor. And he extended himself to Brianne too. Now, our tradition gives language to the kind of person that Jordan was. Shammai taught, say little and do much. In other words, let our commitments be measured not by what we promise, but by what we do. And Rabban Gamliel taught, beautiful is the study of Torah as long as it is with derech eretz, with the way of the world. For exertion in both causes sin to be forgotten. Jordan lived that balance, serious about his responsibilities, steady in his work, and grounded in the everyday decency that turns a life into a blessing. Let me return now to the words of the poet. Just a few short weeks ago, Jordan's life changed dramatically. It's fair to say that when he did, he took off his shoes and he welcomed the sleep and the rest. His journey had come to an end, and it was time for him to come back home. Sandra and Mitch and Sam and Aiden and Phil and Brianne. When words feel too small for a loss like this, our tradition offers a simple prayer of consolation. Hamakom yinachem etchem b'toch sha'ar avalei Tzion v'Yerushalayim. May the Holy One comfort you among all the mourners of Zion and Jerusalem. Just as you have brought Jordan home, I pray that as we welcome you home, to this home, to his and yours and our home, I pray that you be comforted and surrounded by all of the memories of the life that he and Roberta, your father and your mother, shared with you and gave to you, and now continue to serve as a blessing as you build and pass on to others all that has been given to you. Zecher Tzadik Livracha. May Jordan's memory only and always be just for blessing. Amen.
We continue now with Almei Rachamim. If you are able, please rise.
שוכן במרומים המצא מנוחה נכונה תחת כנפי השכינה עם כראשים וטהורים כזוהר הרקיע מזהירים את נשמת יהודה בן שמואל שהלך לעולמו בעל הרחמים יסתירהו בסתר כנפיו לעולמים. ויצרור בצרור החיים את נשמתו, ארוני הוא נחלתו. וינוח בשלום על משכבו, ונאמר Amen.
God of abundant mercy, God most high, may the soul of our loved one, Jordan Brown, who has gone into eternity, find the gift of perfect peace in your embrace, together with the holy and pure, whose light shines like the radiance of heaven. Compassionate God, hold him close to you forever, so that his soul may be bound up in the bond of life eternal. May he find a home with you, and may he rest in peace. As together we say, Amen. Please be seated.